We saw yesterday a brilliant game from Vishwanathan Anand. Could he repeat that kind of performance in his final game? Let's take a look at Wang Hao against Vishwanathan Anand from round 9 of Norway Chess. c4 from the Chinese player. Anand shows that he really wanted to fight today because he's fianchettoing his bishop, more aggressive than the Catalan or the Slav that he often plays. And Wang Hao plays a very conservative variation, just playing his pawn to e3, protecting the knight on d4 of course, but it's very modest indeed because this bishop is blocked in and well, already black has no difficulties at all. But it's a modest continuation for white, but also very solid indeed. Of course, white gets his pieces out very easily and gets castled. So it's a very safe way for white to play. Of course, black could just castle here and perhaps play something like d6 and bishop d7, and black has no difficulties at all. Instead, Anand lashed out with d5. I think that's an indication of his aggressive intent. After these exchanges, the idea for black is that you want to try and open up the position for this dark squared bishop. White exchanged and played knight a4. An interesting continuation. Black's pawns on the queen side have been split, and white perhaps at some later stage is going to try to occupy this weakened square on c5. But in return, black has this beautiful bishop on the diagonal, and that gives black hope. So it's a slightly unbalanced position. Anand would have been, I suppose, reasonably happy with this. Both sides castle, that's sensible. And now here, if black wants to play safe, you could play something like knight b6 and chase that knight. Something like this. In this kind of position, well, the split pawns are balanced by that bishop. Perhaps you can try and get play on the b file. It's roughly level. But Anand wanted to keep pieces on the board. He played bishop f5, which at first glance looks like a good idea. You have these two bishops, now there are two of them raking across the board. That looks pretty good. And now Wang Hao's next move was remarkable. I mean, you could just develop here, but then black would have some initiative. Instead, he played g4. Really unexpected move, but I think not a bad move. The point is that, well, first of all, you drive the bishop away from this dangerous diagonal. It can't stay on e4 because of f3. So the bishop retreats. Doesn't matter if it goes to d7 or e6. The point is, well, e4 is now possible. And then you can play the knight on to c5, excellent square, and because the bishop has been driven back to e6, it's somehow gaining a tempo. Of course, it's problematic for black if the bishop is exchanged and these pawns are doubled. So a really testing continuation from Wang Hao, but it's not that simple. Of course, playing a move like g4 can sometimes weaken your king. And, this square is also available now that white has played e4. So this is a double-edged continuation from white. And I think if black plays accurately, should be okay. For example, here, if black exchanges queens and plays knight c2, well, this forces knight takes bishop. If rook b1, then you can take on a2. So knight takes bishop, now rook b1 forced, and now you can see that although black's pawns have been shattered, the f file is now open, and after bishop d4 there's pressure on the f pawn, and black should be okay here. I think white's also okay, but should be playable for black. But instead, Anand played a shocking move. He took on a2. Very ambitious, too ambitious. After this move, he's in deep trouble. These pieces, I'm afraid, are just hanging. the knight moves, of course, the bishop drops. He played queen d4. Now, it's hard to know what Anand missed here. He must have calculated that, I mean, of course, he understands this, something like this is very risky, but he must have thought that black was okay. After this move, an excellent move, this quiet move, just supporting the knight, black is in deep trouble. Basically, there's no really good defense to rook d1, just attacking the queen and then taking here. You can try various things. For example, well, if rook here is very, very strong, and the queen just doesn't have a good square to go to. Bishop e5. My computer suggests bishop e5. It's not a good move. I mean, basically, there's a forced sequence here. Not king takes bishop, queen takes f2. My computer suggests that this endgame is actually playable for black. This is forced, and now white gets a material balance of knight and bishop against rook and pawn. This is just a winning endgame for white, actually, in spite of what your computer might say. Basically, white has control on the queen side. You play your bishop to c4 and pawn to b3. Your rook comes over and you start pushing the king side pawns with the support of the two bishops. And technically, this is a winning position for white. It takes a long time, but it's got to be winning for white. Anand played rook fd8. And white can just take his time here. There's still no defense to rook d1, which came when the queen moves away. Well, the pieces is dropping. You can see that black's queen has to keep hold of the bishop. So here, black has to give up the queen. Now, on a good day, if black can coordinate this position, he might be okay. But you can see black's pieces are still absolutely terrible. The knight is hanging. This bishop is now in trouble as well. And black loses further material here, because after b3, the rook can't keep hold of the knight, so has to give up here. So we have a material balance of two bishops and a couple of pawns against the queen, but the queen is too strong. There are too many targets, and Wang Hao wrapped up very efficiently, actually. Let me just play through these moves very quickly. The key is just to keep hitting all the weaknesses, basically. And if this rook can exchange itself for either the rook or, well, in this case, actually this is an excellent winning procedure. Wang Hao just gave up rook for bishop, and now the pawn is going to go through with the help of the queen, and there's nothing that black can do. The king can hide very well on g3 and the pawn goes through. So a very disappointing final game from Anand, and something of an anticlimax to the tournament for him. In fact, this last round was, well, I'm afraid didn't live up to expectations. Aronian and Carlsen drew. Both players played very solidly. Karyakin drew against Topalov. He played solidly, although Topalov tried to win. The game eventually ended in a draw. So, final scores. Karyakin won the tournament with 6 out of 9. Carlsen had 5.5. Nakamura defeated Hammer in the last round. It also has 5.5. Svidler, Aronian, Anand on 5. It was a really tremendous tournament. So much fighting chess, and maybe it was understandable that in the last round either the players were exhausted and couldn't give their all to play for a win, or, in this case, blundered badly. There we go. Next big tournament is Moscow, the Tal Memorial, starting in June. Can't remember the date. I'll be giving reports then. Thanks for watching.